and far more than that to her. But as she'd grown older, she'd realized that her dream of being his one day was impossible. Shaheen was a prince. She was the daughter of a servant. Even though her father had become the royal jeweler, who both designed new jewelry for the royal family and had the all-important responsibility of maintaining the nation's highest treasure, the pride of Zaheid royal jewels, he was still an underling, a foreigner who came from a poor background and had worked his way to his current position through his extraordinary talent. And then, Shaheen wouldn't have looked at her that way even if she were the daughter of the noblest family in Zaheid. He had always been incredibly nice to her, but when it came to romantic partners, he'd had the world's most beautiful, sophisticated women falling at his feet from the time he turned 17. Back then, she'd been certain she possessed no beauty and would never attain any sophistication, but she'd found it enough to be near him, to love him. For 8 blissful years, Shaheen had offered her indulgence and friendship. To stay near him, she'd chosen to remain with her father when her parents had separated when she was 12, and her French mother had left Zaheid to go back home and continue her career in fashion design. Then, suddenly, it was over. Just before her 14th birthday, Shaheen had abruptly pulled away from both her brother and her. Aram had told her that Shaheen thought it time to stop fraternizing with the help to observe his role as a prince of Zaheid. Though she couldn't believe it of Shaheen and thought Aram's bitterness had other origins she couldn't guess at, Shaheen's sudden distance was still a wake-up call. For really, what did she have to look forward to but to love him unrequitedly until he one day entered the marriage of state that was his destiny? He might even have turned away from her because he suspected her feelings for him and was being cruel to be kind. His withdrawal had influenced her decision to leave. A few weeks after her birthday, she'd left Zaheid to live in France with her mother. She'd never returned. Ever since that day, Johara had found comfort from the sense of loss only when she found news of Shaheen, saw that he was doing phenomenally well on every front. She'd felt she was entitled to hold on to that secret, one-sided love. But now, the blade was about to fall, and she'd never again have the right to indulge her emotions, even in the privacy of her heart and mind. And she had to see him, really see him, one last time before he committed himself to another. She'd slipped into the farewell party that one of his business partners, Aidan McCormick, was throwing for him in New York City. If anyone questioned her presence, she'd easily defend her right to be there. As a jewelry and fashion designer who'd been making a splash beyond France in the past couple of years, she was considered one of the glitterati who were expected to stud such a function. But validating her presence wasn't the difficult part. That was still to come, working up the nerve to approach Shaheen. She was praying one thing would happen when she did, that she'd find out that she'd blown him all out of proportion in her mind and her feelings for him as well. Suddenly, a wave of goosebumps swept her from toes to scalp. She turned around, the rustle of her taffeta dress magnified in her ears. Shaheen was here. For a long moment, she couldn't see him. But the people-packed space receded into a void where his presence radiated like a beacon. Not from the entrance, where her gaze had been glued for the past 2 hours, but from the other side of the room. It made no sense until she realized he must have used McCormick's private elevator. His aura, his vibe, hit her like a gut punch. Then she saw him. Only him. Everything stilled inside her, in awe, in confusion. He'd towered over her before, though she'd been 5'7" at 14. Now she stood 6 feet wearing 2-inch heels.